I spent my whole life as His Majesty's bitter spouse. He often threatened to exterminate my 9 generations of kin, while I vowed to leave him without descendants. In the end, both of us got our wishes fulfilled. During my 30 years overseeing the imperial harem, not a single child was born. Everyone in the palace jokingly called me the abortion queen, and he, before his death, tore off the yellow ribbon by the bed. I will never give you the chance to rule behind the curtain and disrupt Tingwen's peaceful retreat in the nunnery. If there is a next life, I don't want to be emperor anymore. I only wish to be her 6th brother. The yellow sash breaks. Suspicions arise with the sovereign's death. My entire clan was beheaded for plotting against the Son of Heaven. Upon reopening my eyes, I resolved to fulfill his wish of not becoming emperor. Father, your daughter wishes to marry the 3rd prince. The study was filled with the curling smoke of sandalwood incense as I knelt before my father, enunciating each word with unusual clarity. Father's brush hand paused mid-stroke, the ink-laden tip hovering in the air until a single drop fell onto the rice paper before him, spreading rapidly into a blot that ruined the nearly completed landscape painting. He lifted his gaze, eyes sharp as an eagle's, scrutinizing me. Why? His voice remained steady, betraying neither anger nor joy. Haven't you always been infatuated with the 6th prince, Li Xian? Li Xian. That name was like an ice-cold needle piercing straight into my heart. In my past life, I was indeed deeply enamored with him. He was the legitimate son of the late empress. Exceptionally intelligent and pitilessly graceful since childhood, the dream of every noble maiden in the capital. I was no exception. In my past life, my father had asked me the same question. Our Kui family has been a distinguished lineage of officials since the founding of the dynasty, with a century-old reputation and overwhelming influence in the imperial court. A daughter of the Kui family has always been destined to become empress. In my generation, the current emperor was advanced in years yet had delayed naming a crown prince. Beneath the court's surface, undercurrents surged fiercely as several adult princes each used their skills to forge alliances. As the head of all officials, my father's choice, or rather, the Kui family's choice, could almost determine who would become the true son of heaven. At that moment, my face flushed crimson, and with my head bowed, I whispered Li Xian's name in a voice as faint as a mosquito's hum. After a long silence, father finally nodded. With the full support of my Kui family, Li Xian gained wings like a tiger. In just one short year, he rose from an unremarkable prince to become the crown prince. Following the grand ceremony of his investiture as crown prince came my wedding. I thought I had finally gotten my wish, marrying the man I loved, about to become the most noble woman in the world. But I forgot, Li Xian's beloved was never me. On the day of our grand wedding, Su Tingwen wore plain white robes and volunteered to go to Ganya Temple to pray for the nation's blessings, dedicating the rest of her life to spiritual cultivation. From that day onward, Li Xian hated me. He believed it was me. It was our Kui family, who used our power to drive away his beloved and ruined his lifelong happiness. For the next 30 years, he tormented me day and night, and tormented himself as well. All his longing and guilt towards Su Tingwen turned into hatred and vengeance against me. The abortion empress, this was the ending I received. Now that I've been given a second chance, how could I possibly tread that old path paved with blood and tears again, pulling my thoughts from the abyss of memories? I raised my head to meet my father's probing gaze. Father, your daughter was young and ignorant in the past. I lowered my lashes, concealing the surging hatred and sorrow in my eyes. Now I've come to realize that royal marriages are not about romantic love, though the 6th prince is admirable. He is not a suitable match for your daughter. Oh, father set down his brush on the stand and leaned slightly forward. What do you mean by that? The 6th prince, he has someone else in his heart. I spoke softly, each word seeming to emerge from an ice cellar. If our daughter marries into that family, not only will she fail to bring any benefit to our clan, but she may also provoke resentment and disaster out of jealousy. A forced melon is not sweet. This principle, father understands better than I do. The study fell into prolonged silence, broken only by the rustling sound of wind passing through the bamboo grove outside the window. Nonsense, he finally spoke. With a trace of barely detectable anger, A royal marriage, how can it be swayed by mere words like the one I love? Li Xian and Su Tingwen grew up together. I've long heard of their childhood bond, but so what? The Su family is merely a scholarly household, how can they compare to our Kui family? As long as you marry into their household, the position of crown princess, and eventually empress, will be yours alone. A mere Su Tingwen won't be an obstacle, I sneered inwardly. In my past life, everyone thought she wouldn't be an obstacle, yet it was this woman, secluded far away in a temple, who became Li Xian's untouchable taboo, the root of my 30-year confinement in the cold palace, and the venomous curse that drove him to eradicate my Kui family even on his deathbed. Father, I raised my head, my gaze devoid of any maidenly shyness, leaving only the calm and resolve forged through hardship. Your daughter's mind is made up. Although the third prince's maternal clan has declined and his political footing remains shallow, his temperament is gentle and his character humble. With the Kui family's support, success is not beyond reach. Most importantly, his household is untainted, free from those messy romantic entanglements. Only by marrying into such a family can your daughter truly unite hearts with her husband and devote herself wholeheartedly to our clan's cause. My words made my father's brows knit tightly together. He remained silent for a long time, his fingers unconsciously tracing the carvings on the penholder. Have you thought this through, third Prince Li Yang? Choosing him means embarking on an even more difficult path. This daughter has thought it through. I bend down, pressing my forehead against the cold floor tiles. Father, I beg for your approval, rather than taking that seemingly flowery path which actually leads to hell. I'd rather choose this treacherous road covered in thorns. At least, at the end of this path, there might still be a glimmer of hope. So be it. After a long while, I heard my father let out a faint sigh. If your mind is made up, then as your father, I shall indulge you this once. That very night, my father changed into his court robes, prepared the carriage and horses, and entered the palace. I sat alone in my courtyard throughout the night, waiting until the first light of dawn tinged the sky before finally receiving word of my father's return. The elderly maid Zhong by mother's side hurried over with a joyful expression. Miss, the master has returned. News from the palace says, His Majesty has already consented to your marriage with the third prince. My anxious heart finally settled halfway. Maid Zhong added another sentence. The imperial decree hasn't been issued yet. They say we must wait for the Ministry of Rites to select an auspicious date before announcing it to the world. My fingertips brushed against the cool window lattice as I let out a long sigh of relief. The next afternoon, I thought about going to the garden to cut a few peonies that were in full bloom, but no sooner had I picked up the flower scissors than I heard hurried and chaotic footsteps approaching from behind. The servants' panicked attempts to stop the visitor were utterly futile. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. That figure in dark brocade robes swept into my tranquil courtyard with a fierce gust of wind. Kui Yuanro. Li Xian's voice was laced with ice, brimming with barely suppressed fury. He must have heard the news that my father rushed into the palace last night and naturally assumed that the Kui family had gone to request an imperial decree for our marriage. Do you really have to go this far, pressuring His Majesty through your father? Is this your tactic? He strode toward me, his tall figure blocking the morning light entirely, casting a shadow that enveloped me completely. Ignoring his accusation, I simply lowered my head and focused on the flower in my hand. That was a pink-white peony, layer upon layer, blooming with delicate and radiant beauty. My silence clearly infuriated him. Do you think relying on the Kui family's power can win my heart? Let me tell you, Li Xian's heart belongs only to Tingwen. In this life and the next, she alone holds my love. His voice was not loud, yet each word was as sharp as a blade, carrying undisguised contempt and disgust. Kui Yuanro, put away those unsavory thoughts of yours. Even if His Majesty issues an edict, even if you marry me with great fanfare, don't expect an ounce of pity from me. My crown princess, my future empress, will only be Tingwen. He stood there, solemnly pronouncing my fate. Just as he had in my past life, that handsome face I once adored was now filled with hatred for me. This ruthless and scheming woman. Listening to his impassioned declaration, I couldn't even be bothered to lift an eyelid. In my past life, hearing these words would have felt like a knife twisting in my heart, leaving me in unbearable agony. But now, all I feel is annoyance. Finished talking. Finally, I raised my eyes, my gaze calmly sweeping over his face, slightly flushed with anger. Seeing me so indifferent, Li Xian seemed unprepared for this reaction. Momentarily stunned, with a flick of my wrist, the silver scissors made a crisp snip sound as I cut off the most luxuriant peony bloom. The flower head fell, rolling halfway across the bluestone pavement, gathering a bit of dust. I meticulously trimmed away the excess leaves from the stem before finally speaking unhurriedly, my voice carrying a hint of mockery even I hadn't noticed. Sixth Prince, why say such words to me? You'd do better to speak them to Miss Su. No doubt she'd be moved to tears, vowing to marry none but you. Li Xian's face instantly turned ashen. You, what do you mean by this? Does the sixth prince truly not understand my meaning? I toyed with the freshly trimmed flower branch in my hand, my gaze settling on his tightly clenched fist, my tone light as a feather yet each word piercing like a needle. If you truly love Miss Su as deeply as the sea, you should be kneeling outside the Grand Tutor's residence right now, pleading before the palace gates, begging His Majesty to bless your legendary romance, instead of running into the courtyard of my Kui family, venting your grievances and affections to someone as irrelevant as me. I tilted my head slightly, a cold smirk curling at the corner of my lips. Or perhaps, sixth prince, you also think the Su family is too humble to match your imperial nobility, or maybe you simply lack the courage and capability to defy His Majesty and relinquish power within your grasp, all for the sake of a woman. So, all you can do is yell at me here, pinning all the blame on a woman to make yourself seem helpless, noble, and innocent. Shut up. Li Xian, struck where it hurt, flew into a rage, his voice cracking with fury. What do you know? The bond between Tingwen and me is beyond your comprehension. Everything I've done is for our future. With the court in turmoil, one misstep from me would doom not just myself but her as well. I'm protecting her. Oh, protect her. It sounded like the biggest joke I'd ever heard, and I couldn't help but let out a light chuckle. With your mouth. This retort landed like a resounding slap across Li Xian's face, his handsome face flushed crimson, his lips trembling, yet not a single word of rebuttal could he utter. All those high-sounding reasons appeared so pale and ridiculous before me. After a long standoff, Li Xian seemed to finally realize that arguing with me over these matters was utterly meaningless. Suppressing his anger with difficulty, he stiffly changed the subject, revealing his true purpose for coming today. I didn't come here to argue with you, Tingwen. She's recently caught a severe cold, gravely ill, confined to her bed. As he spoke these words, his gaze drifted away, no longer meeting mine. As if this was something too shameful to mention, I listened quietly without responding. After waiting a moment and seeing no reaction from me, he finally grew impatient, his tone reverting to its previous air of natural superiority. I've heard your Kui family possesses a century-old ginseng, a tribute from the previous dynasty, said to have life-extending properties. Give it to me, I'll use it to cure Tingwen. Hearing this, I finally couldn't hold back and let out a low chuckle. Li Xian was baffled by my laughter, his expression growing increasingly grim. What are you laughing at? A life hangs in the balance, and you're this heartless. I slowly composed myself, lifting my gaze, my eyes as cold as ice in the 12th month. Sixth prince, have you lost your mind? I enunciated each word clearly. Your beloved is sick. What does that have to do with me? What does it have to do with the Kui family? How dare you assume I would hand over my family's heirloom treasure to someone unrelated, someone who, you claim, will replace me? His logic, his arrogance, it all struck me as utterly incomprehensible. In my past life, how utterly foolish I must have been to fall in love with such a selfish man to the core. He loathed the power of the Kui family, yet had no qualms about wanting to use that very power to save his beloved. Since when has such logic ever existed under heaven? Kui Yuanro. Li Xian was thoroughly enraged by my words. He took a step forward as if to grab my arm, his tone laced with threat. Don't be ungrateful. If you're willing to help, I can let bygones be bygones regarding what happened before. But if Tingwen suffers even a scratch, I won't let you off. Let bygones be bygones. I savored these 4 words, finding them utterly absurd. Has there ever been anything between you and me that requires your forgiveness? 6th Prince, you overestimate yourself. I took a step back, avoiding his outstretched hand, the last trace of warmth vanishing from my face. Guards, my voice was quiet, yet carried an undeniable authority. The maids and servants waiting outside the courtyard immediately rushed in. Escort the 6th Prince out. Yes, miss. The servants bowed in acknowledgement, and several burly attendants stepped forward. Blocking Li Xian's path while gesturing politely for him to leave, Kui Yuanro, how dare you? Li Xian hadn't expected me to actually dare to drive him away. Trembling with rage, he pointed at my nose. How dare you treat me like this? You've got some nerve. I couldn't be bothered to waste another word on him. Turning away, I walked to the corridor, picked up a bronze basin nearby, and leisurely washed my hands as if I'd just touched something filthy. Li Xian's furious curses intertwined with the servants' respectful yet firm voices urging, "Your Highness, please return." As a prince, he couldn't very well resort to actual violence in a minister's residence. In the end, surrounded by servants who escorted him, he was half pushed, half persuaded out of the courtyard. Outside the courtyard, his frustrated roars could still faintly be heard. Brimming with impotent rage, I dried my hands, picked up the peony I had cut, and placed it in a white porcelain vase standing by the corridor pillar. The delicate pink-white petals remain as tender as ever, though severed from their branch, they likely won't survive much longer. After escorting Li Xian out of the manor, my days became leisurely to the point of extravagance. Each day, I would either tend to the rare and precious flowers in the greenhouse or practice calligraphy by copying the works of renowned masters from previous dynasties in the study. Occasionally, my mother would take me along to listen to storytelling sessions by the newly arrived female narrator. The tales of infatuated lovers and resentful souls, their unwavering devotion, sounded to me like stories from another world utterly disconnected from my own existence. As for Li Xian, his days were rather troubled. That day when he barged into the Kui residence and spoke disrespectfully to me, the very next morning during court. Censors from the imperial censorate submitted a memorial impeaching the 6th Prince for arrogance and impropriety, intimidating the family members of a high-ranking official. The lengthy document detailed his outrageous behavior. Although the emperor did not impose severe punishment, he did reprimand Li Xian publicly in court and ordered him to reflect on his mistakes behind closed doors. The political winds in the court shifted swiftly, seizing this opportunity. Father quietly paved the way for the 3rd Prince, Li Yang, on several crucial court matters. Li Yang did not disappoint. His policy proposals on dredging canals and reducing taxes along the waterways were well structured and addressed pressing issues, earning him praise from His Majesty. For a time, the previously inconspicuous 3rd Prince began to subtly rival several more prominent princes in court influence. These tidbits were relayed to me as casual chatter by mother's maidservant. I listened quietly, my embroidery needle moving unhurriedly across the frame, stitching delicate crabapple petals. Everything is proceeding exactly as I envisioned. Half a month later, Princess Enyang hosted a flower viewing banquet at her private estate, inviting noble ladies from across the capital. The invitation for the Kui family's legitimate daughter was naturally the first to be delivered. In my past life, I adored such lively gatherings solely for the chance to catch another glimpse of Li Xian. Now when I go again, my state of mind is already different. The peonies in the princess's villa are in full bloom, clusters of flowers dazzlingly beautiful, their fragrance overwhelming. Noble ladies gather in small groups, their perfumed sleeves and hair ornaments swaying, chatting and laughing merrily. I found a quiet waterside pavilion to sit in, exchanged just a few words with some familiar young ladies, and then fell silent. Before long, a slight commotion arose. Following the sound, I saw Su Tingwen approaching slowly, surrounded by a group of young ladies. Today, she wore a pale blue gown that accentuated her delicate figure and pallid complexion. Her appearance instantly drew everyone's attention, with many casting sympathetic glances her way. After all, Her romantic tale with the sixth prince was no longer a secret. Upon seeing me, Su Tingwen's eyes flickered with a trace of complex emotion before she quickly lowered her head, timidly avoiding my gaze as if I were some kind of monstrous threat. I withdrew my gaze, picked up the teacup, and gently blew on the tea leaves floating on the surface. Sure enough, trouble had come knocking on its own. Midway through the banquet, Su Tingwen's personal maid suddenly let out a horrified scream. "Miss, where is the Agawad prayer bracelet you were wearing on your wrist?" Hearing this, Su Tingwen's face turned deathly pale. She immediately reached for her wrist, only to find it bare. Her body swayed as if she might faint, supported by her maid beside her, her voice trembling uncontrollably. "That was my mother's keepsake." For a moment, all eyes were fixed on her. Losing a keepsake is no small matter. Everyone chimed in with words of comfort and helped search everywhere. Su Tingwen's maid was the most quick-witted. She glanced around, her gaze ultimately landing squarely on me. Carrying an undisguised accusation, just now, my young lady was standing closest to Miss Kui and even accidentally brushed sleeves with her. Could it have been then? She left her words unfinished, but the implication was crystal clear. The surroundings fell silent instantly, as countless probing, suspicious, and gleeful eyes turned toward me. After all, Su Tingwen had indeed lingered by my side just moments ago. I leisurely set down the teacup and raised my eyes to look at the maid. My gaze calm and unruffled. "Do you mean to say that I stole your young lady's prayer beads?" The maid faltered under my gaze but still mustered the courage to speak. "This servant wouldn't dare accuse. It's just, aside from Miss Kui, no one else has been near my young lady." "Is that so?" I smiled faintly and turned my gaze to Su Tingwen, who was on the verge of tears. "Miss Su, is that what you think too?" Su Tingwen bit her lower lip, tears welling up in her eyes, looking as if she had suffered immense injustice but dared not speak of it. "Sister Yuanro, I didn't mean it that way. It's just that the prayer beads hold great significance for me. So please, sister." Her demeanor only served to further confirm my suspicion. In her previous life, she harbored ill intentions and envied my grand marriage, resorting to underhanded schemes behind my back. Though unsuccessful, she still managed to displease my father. Father intended to punish her severely, but it was my consideration for Li Xian that spared her, resulting only in her being sent to a temple for quiet cultivation and prayer. Yet this very act of quiet cultivation became her means to win Li Xian's sympathy and guilt, marking the beginning of my 30-year tragedy. Who would have thought that now, she would attempt the same trick again? At that moment, an angry voice came from not far away. "Enough, Kui Yuanro, what more excuses do you have?" Li Xian had arrived unnoticed. He strode swiftly to Su Tingwen's side, shielding her behind him, his eyes blazing with fury as they fixed on me. "I always knew you were narrow-minded and consumed by jealousy. Just because Tingwen and I share mutual affection, you must humiliate and retaliate against her like this, publicly slandering her, making her lose all dignity. Is this the upbringing of Kui family's legitimate daughter?" His voice was stern and his expression severe, each word sounding like a judgment against me. The noble ladies around lowered their heads, whispering among themselves, their gazes toward me turning disdainful, watching this ridiculous farce unfold before me. Observing Li Xian's righteous act of playing the hero to save the damsel, I felt not a ripple of emotion, not even the slightest effort to muster scorn. Ignoring his roars, I simply stood up and swept my gaze between Su Tingwen and her ever-loyal maid. "Miss Su's prayer beads are made of agarwood, correct?" Su Tingwen froze for a moment before nodding instinctively. Since it's agarwood, it easily absorbs surrounding scents. I slowly walked up to her, my gaze settling on the sachet at her waist. "You're wearing cold plum blossom today, aren't you? This fragrance is crisp and cool. If the prayer beads were on you, they would undoubtedly carry this scent. Conversely, if I had taken them, the beads would smell like the warm mugwort incense from my robes." I paused briefly, my voice soft yet clear enough to reach everyone's ears. "Right or wrong, fetch a hound with a keen sense of smell, and the truth will be revealed in a single sniff." As these words fell, Su Tingwen's face instantly turned deathly pale. The maid beside her couldn't help but tremble uncontrollably. Li Xian was about to say something more when a gentle voice interrupted him. Imperial brother. Please calm yourself. The third prince, Li Yang, had arrived at the waterside pavilion unnoticed. He gave Li Xian a slight nod before turning to me with warm, composed eyes. The truth remains unclear, and we should not jump to conclusions. Although Miss Kui's suggestion is well-intentioned, employing hounds would ultimately be undignified. In my opinion, it would be better to ask Her Highness the Princess to assign 2 discreet matrons to search this maid. Perhaps something will be found. His gaze, seemingly casual, settled on the trembling maid. The maid fell to her knees with a thud, her face drained of color. At this point, the truth was already glaringly obvious. Li Xian's face turned pale, then flushed with anger. He stared incredulously at the frail and helpless Su Tingwen behind him. His eyes filled with shock and disappointment. At that very moment, the Grand Princess and Her Majesty the Empress arrived together. The Empress had clearly already heard about the incident. Her phoenix eyes slightly narrowed, her gaze sharp as a blade, radiating authority without showing anger. Daring to employ such vile tactics of framing others even outside the palace, what audacity! The Queen's voice was icy cold. Without even glancing at the kneeling maid, her gaze pierced straight through Su Tingwen. As a daughter of the imperial clan, instead of cultivating virtue, you harbor wicked thoughts and stir up trouble. Guards, take this girl back and confine her to her residence. Without my express command, she is not to take a single step beyond her chamber. Su Tingwen's body went limp as she collapsed completely to the ground. The Queen then turned to me, her expression softening considerably. Yuan Ru, I've wronged you. I knelt and bowed. Thank you for your Majesty's understanding. The Empress nodded without another word and moved to her throne. And so, the farce came to an end. Li Xian stood rooted to the spot, his expression grim beyond words. With that, he turned on his heel and left, not even sparing Su Tingwen another glance. By the time the banquet concluded, dusk was already approaching. Just as I was about to board my family's carriage, Li Yang's voice called out from behind me, Miss Kui. I turned around and saw him standing in the afterglow of the sunset, dressed in a moon-white brocade robe, as gentle and refined as jade. Today's matter was resolved thanks to Your Highness the Third Prince's intervention. I curtsied slightly. He smiled, his expression as gentle as a spring breeze. It was nothing. I'm afraid I startled you, miss. It's getting late. If you don't mind, allow me to escort you home. It would set my mind at ease. His suggestion was reasonable, so I didn't refuse. The carriage moved slowly along the road back to the estate. Inside, calming incense burned, creating a tranquil atmosphere. He made no further mention of the unpleasant incident from earlier in the day, merely chatting with me about poetry, literature, and various anecdotes ranging from ancient stele inscriptions to the popular lyric meters of the time. His knowledge was vast, his words witty, yet he maintained a sense of propriety in every remark, making one feel entirely at ease. Being with him was truly like basking in the spring breeze. Yet this breeze, though capable of rippling a pond of spring water, could not warm a frozen lake already 3 feet deep in ice. I gaze at the rapidly receding street scenes outside the window, feeling a deep calm within. This warmth towards me is merely a move on the chessboard, and this gentle nobleman is nothing more than the most important piece on that board. It has nothing to do with love, only the path ahead. Since that flower-viewing banquet, my interactions with Third Prince Li Yang have indeed increased. Sometimes he would send someone to deliver a few rare travelogues, and sometimes I would reciprocate with a box of hand-blended incense. We often met at suburban estates or elegant bookshops in the city, discussing nothing more than romantic musings, classics, histories, philosophies, and literary works. He never overstepped boundaries, maintaining just the right balance of closeness and respect in his words and actions, which made one feel thoroughly at ease. That day, after viewing a newly arrived collection of ancient calligraphy rubbings at Luyun Pavilion, I was about to step out and board the carriage when I unexpectedly ran into an unforeseen pair. Li Xian was supporting Su Tingwen as they emerged from a jewelry shop across the street. Su Tingwen's house arrest had been lifted at some point, unnoticed. Now, with a rosy complexion and a delicate new tasseled gold hairpin adorning her hair. She tilted her head up, smiling charmingly at Li Xian. The sight was glaring, yet it failed to stir even the slightest ripple in my heart. They noticed us too. Su Tingwen's smile froze on her face as she instinctively shrank behind Li Xian. Li Xian's gaze shot toward me like an arrow, but when he noticed Li Yang standing calmly by my side with a faint smile, his eyes instantly turned dark and hostile. Third brother, Yuanro. Li Yang was the first to speak, breaking the heavy silence. His expression remained unchanged, as if it were just an ordinary encounter. Li Xian didn't even glance at him, his eyes fixed intently on me, though his words were directed at Li Yang. Third brother seems quite at leisure, having time to accompany Miss Kui on a stroll. His tone carried a hint of sourness and a whiff of gunpowder. I couldn't be bothered with him and only spoke to Li Yang. It's getting late, I should return to the residence. I'll walk you back. Li Yang nodded. As the two of us turned to leave, Li Xian stepped forward and blocked my path. Kui Yuanro, stop right there. I halted my steps, looking at him coldly. He lowered his voice, his tone filled with anger and warning. Do you insist on degrading yourself like this? To get back at me, you'd cling to third brother. His naive, stay away from him. These words are truly laughable. As I looked at his face twisted with jealousy, I could only feel absurdity. In my past life, he regarded me as venomous snakes and scorpions, yet in this life, he puts on such an act again. Sixth prince, I spoke, my voice calm and steady. What business is it of yours? Instead of meddling in my affairs, you'd do better to keep your own people in check. Tell her to stop scheming behind the scenes next time. Confinement won't be the only consequence. My gaze swept lightly over Su Tingwen, who stood pale-faced behind him, before I withdrew it, without another glance. I stepped past him and boarded the carriage. Li Xian's face darkened with rage, his clenched fists trembling audibly, yet he dared not act out further in Li Yang's presence. The autumn breeze carried a refreshing coolness, signaling the arrival of the annual royal autumn hunt. The capital's nobility gathered in great numbers at the Western Hills hunting grounds, with banners fluttering. What a lively scene! I sat quietly with my mother in the viewing stands. Having no interest in the hunting activities, midway through, I excused myself to freshen up and left the noisy crowd alone, strolling along a secluded path to clear my mind. Dappled light filtered through the trees, and the air was fresh. Before long, a deliberately softened voice called out from behind, "Sister Yuanro." It was Su Tingwen, dressed in a neat riding outfit today. She appeared less frail than usual. I didn't respond and kept walking forward. She quickened her pace to catch up. Walking side by side with me, her voice carrying a hint of barely concealed triumph. "Sister, why bother avoiding me? I know you must be resentful deep down, but so what? Sixth brother's heart belongs to me, it always has been me. Did you think turning to third prince would make you win against me?" Seeing my silence, she let out a light laugh and continued, "You're merely picking up what I discarded, if not for my circumstances. Do you really think someone like you could catch sixth brother's eye? And now you're repeating your old tricks, clinging to third prince. Don't you find it pathetic? Kui Yuanro, you'll forever live in my shadow." I halted my steps and finally looked her squarely in the face. Her expression brimmed with the smugness of a victor, that same self-righteous superiority unchanged from our past life. "Finished?" I asked. She froze for a moment. "Su Tingwen." I looked at her, my eyes devoid of anger. "Only indifference. Your greatest tragedy is always assuming others are as shallow as you. You think every man in the world can't live without you, and every woman is jealous of you. Your world is pitifully small. You," her face flushed crimson as I hit a sore spot, instantly flushed with anger. "Kui Yuanro, stop pretending to be virtuous. You're just a jealous woman no one wants." Just as her voice turned shrill, a sudden whistling sound cut through the forest air. Several arrows glinting coldly shot toward me from different directions. Suddenly, disaster struck. The horse beside me reared up in fright. In the blink of an eye, I saw a flash of ruthlessness and determination in Su Tingwen's eyes as she abruptly reached out and shoved me hard toward the path of the incoming arrows. "Die!" she shrieked. 11. I had been prepared. The moment she pushed, I used the momentum to roll aside, narrowly dodging the lethal arrows. At the same time, several black-clad, masked figures leaped out from the woods, brandishing knives and slashing toward me. I scrambled away desperately, pulling out the golden hairpin from my head and thrusting it backward into the wrist of the nearest assassin. The assassin cried out in pain, his knife strike veering off course. Yuan Ru, it was Li Yang's voice. He had clearly heard the commotion here and was galloping over on horseback. Seeing this, one assassin changed targets. Swinging his blade at Li Yang, who was charging at the front. "Be careful," I shouted a warning. Li Yang turned to block, but was a step too slow. The blade struck his left shoulder, instantly staining his moon-white robe with blood. He staggered slightly, yet still shielded me firmly, seeing him injured for my sake. A surge of fury burned within me. I broke free from his embrace and picked up a fallen long sword from the ground. In my previous life, during 30 years in the Deep Palace, I had learned a few sword techniques for self-defense to protect myself. At this moment, the instinct for survival and the calmness accumulated over 2 lifetimes left me without fear. Li Yang and I stood back to back, fending off wave after wave of attacks from the assassins. Fortunately, the guards at the hunting grounds were quickly alerted, and the sound of urgent hoofbeats and shouts came from all directions. The assassins seemed to target only me. Seeing the guards arrive, they immediately retreated into the dense forest, covering each other. With the crisis resolved, my tense nerves suddenly relaxed. As for Li Yang, he had already turned as pale as paper from excessive blood loss. I turned around, my gaze sweeping over the chaos before precisely locking onto the trembling figure slumped under a tree not far away. Su Tingwen. Step by step, I walked toward her, the knife in my hand dragging along the ground, leaving behind a grating screech. She stared at me in terror, shrinking back uncontrollably. Don't come any closer. It wasn't me. I didn't mean to." I walked up to her, raised my hand, and with all my strength, slapped her hard across the face. The crisp sound of smack echoed distinctly through the silent woods. "This slap is to teach you how to be a decent person." I looked at her swollen, reddened face, my voice as cold as ice. "When you pushed me out to take the blame, why didn't you say it wasn't intentional?" After speaking, I no longer looked at her and turned to run towards Li Yang, tearing off a piece of my skirt to press firmly against his still bleeding wound. The guards finally arrived, and the leader of the Imperial Guards paled at the sight before him. "Quickly escort the third prince back to the tent for treatment," I commanded, my voice carrying an air of unquestionable authority. "And also, tie this woman up and bring her before His Majesty." My finger pointed at Su Tingwen, my gaze sharp as a blade. Inside the imperial tent, the atmosphere was heavy as iron. The emperor sat in the main seat, his face as dark as water. I knelt below, the abrasions on my arms having been briefly bandaged by the imperial physician, with spots of blood seeping through the white gauze. Su Tingwen was held kneeling beside me by 2 guards, already frightened out of her wits, reduced to nothing but tears. I recounted everything that had just happened without omitting a single word, no embellishments added, only stating the facts, because the facts themselves are already shocking enough. If not for His Highness the Third Prince arriving in time and risking his life to protect me, your subject would likely have been slain by the blade today. Yet Su Tingwen, in her bid to save herself, pushed me toward the assassin. Her heart deserves execution. I beg your Majesty to uphold justice for your subject. As soon as these words fell, hurried footsteps sounded outside the tent, and Li Xian burst in. He glanced at the wounds on my arm, then looked at Su Tingwen, who was crying pitifully, his face filled with anxiety and inner conflict. He suddenly knelt down with a thud, actually pleading for Su Tingwen's sake. "Father, please calm your anger." Tingwen was merely overwhelmed by shock for a moment. She meant no harm. She's just a delicate woman who suddenly encountered assassins. It's understandable that she might act thoughtlessly in such a state of panic. I beg you to see reason. The emperor stared at him coldly. An unintentional act. Pushing someone to the blade's edge, is that also unintentional? Li Xian. Do you take me for a fool? Li Xian was left speechless. He turned to look at me, his gaze complex, and finally gritted his teeth before uttering words that left me utterly bewildered. "Father, This matter arose because of me, Kui Yuenro. She merely acted out of jealousy, blowing things out of proportion to take revenge on Tingwen. I am willing to marry her as my consort, as long as she agrees not to pursue Tingwen's mistake. I will give her status. I beg you, father, to grant us marriage. As these words fell, silence enveloped the entire tent. I could hardly believe my ears. Did he really think that I went through all that trouble, even risking my life, just to marry him? And he considers granting me the title of a concubine as his magnanimous favor. The emperor was so furious that his entire body trembled. He grabbed a jade inkstone from the desk and hurled it violently at Li Xian. You worthless scoundrel! The jade inkstone shattered into pieces at Li Xian's feet. The emperor pointed at him, trembling with rage. Look at the nonsense you're spouting. Your third brother risked his life to protect Yuan Ru and remains gravely injured, unconscious to this day. And you, instead of inquiring about your own brother's condition, you stand here weaving pretty lies for that venomous woman, distorting right and wrong. How could I have fathered such a muddle-headed fool? The emperor's chest heaved violently with rage. Supporting himself on the desk, he rose to his feet and glared down at Li Xian, enunciating each word slowly. You want to marry her? Are you worthy? Let me tell you, Yuan Ru has long been betrothed to your third brother. The imperial decree announcing their marriage will be issued soon. Who are you to interfere? The emperor's word was final, as unchangeable as gold. Li Xian stood frozen in place as if struck by lightning, his face a mask of disbelief. He suddenly turned to me, his eyes filled with absurdity and scrutiny, as if trying to detect any trace of deceit on my calm and expressionless face. No, impossible. Father, you, shut up, the emperor roared in anger, cutting off his futile defense. I'm not yet senile. Your third brother and Yuan Ru have long been in love, a matter tacitly acknowledged by both me and Minister Kui, awaiting only the right moment to announce it to the world. Yet you blinded by a venomous woman to the point of disregarding both brotherly bonds and the propriety between ruler and subject. The emperor's gaze turned to me, already carrying a hint of reassurance and guilt. Yuenro, you've suffered injustice. Today, I shall give you an explanation. He no longer paid attention to the distraught Li Xian and directly issued orders to the Imperial Guard commander. Interrogate the assassin thoroughly, get to the bottom of who's behind this. I want to know who has the audacity to lay hands on my daughter-in-law in the royal hunting grounds, as your majesty commands. The storm within the imperial tent swiftly swept through the entire court. The order for a thorough investigation was executed with lightning speed. And the results emerged faster than anyone had anticipated. The assassin turned out to be a death warrior secretly raised by a fallen official in the court, and the thread that led to uncovering this connection was traced back to an inconspicuous old servant woman by Su Tingwen's side. The woman was a lifelong servant of the Su family, with her daughter serving as a concubine in the household of the disgraced official. Thus, the connection was gradually established. Su Tingwen offered a hefty bribe, promising to restore the official to his former position once the deed was done. All she asked was to create chaos at the hunting grounds and take my life. With both witnesses and material evidence present, Su Tingwen didn't even have a chance to defend herself. She thought her scheme was flawless, but little did she know that in the face of true imperial power, any underhanded trick is as fragile as thin paper easily torn apart. The imperial decree soon arrived at the Su residence. Su Tingwen, with wicked intentions, framed loyal officials, plotted against noble ladies, and committed crimes unforgivable by death. She is hereby granted 3 feet of white silk, to be carried out immediately. When the news arrived, I was in the Buddhist hall copying scriptures, praying for Li Yang. Listening to the matron's report, my brush tip did not falter in the slightest. The final character was placed steadily, its strokes restrained, just like the state of my heart at this moment. In the previous life, she was still able to spend her remaining days with a solitary lamp and ancient Buddha, becoming the cinnabar mole in Li Xian's heart day and night. This life was clean and decisive, directly sparing her from those hypocritical ascetic practices. Perhaps this was the ending she was always meant to have. The Su residence was filled with wailing cries. As the Su family fell from grace overnight, Meanwhile, Li Xian, for failing to recognize the truth and sheltering a guilty woman, was confined to his mansion by imperial decree, forbidden to leave without permission. Once glorious, the sixth prince completely lost the emperor's favor. Soon after, a second imperial decree was announced to the world, formally betrothing me to the third prince, Li Yang. In an instant, the political winds shifted completely. My father and the entire Kui family's influence were unreservedly poured into Li Yang, already known for his kindness and virtue. With considerable reputation in the court, he now had the backing of the mighty Kui family, and his influence grew stronger by the day. The emperor intentionally tested Li Yang's knowledge during several court assemblies, and his responses were consistently composed and appropriate. With unique insights that greatly pleased His Majesty, who showered him with praise, in less than half a year, the position of the crown prince was settled. The third prince, Li Yang, entered the Eastern Palace as heir apparent. Our grand wedding was scheduled for the following spring. On the eve of the grand wedding, just as the instructing matron sent by the palace had finished explaining tomorrow's rituals to me, a servant came to report that the sixth prince, now he should be called the deposed Prince Li Xian, was requesting an audience outside the mansion. I sat upright before the mirror, gazing at my reflection adorned with the phoenix crown and ceremonial robes. The youthful innocence had long faded from my brows and eyes, leaving only a quiet chill. Let him in. Li Xian was brought into my courtyard. He had grown much thinner, his former air of noble dignity completely vanished. The faded old robe he wore made his complexion appear sallow. His eyes filled with exhaustion and bloodshot streaks. He looked at me, his Adam's apple bobbing for a long while before he finally spoke in a hoarse voice. "You are marrying third brother tomorrow." I didn't say anything, just quietly watched him. His eyes welled with intense regret and anguish as he stepped toward me, his voice trembling uncontrollably. "Yuan Ru, I was wrong. I was truly wrong. I was blind. I was foolish beyond measure, mistaking fish eyes for pearls. Tingwen she. How could she be that kind of person? I've wronged you," he rambled incoherently, his words jumbled and disordered. I looked at him in this state, feeling utterly unmoved in my heart. 30 years of resentment from my past life had long since worn away that ridiculous shred of affection. "You were wrong. Not for believing in Su Tingwen," I finally spoke, my voice as clear and cold as water. "You were wrong because you never saw the situation clearly, nor did you ever see yourself clearly." He froze, staring at me in confusion. "Do you regret it?" I stood up, walked over to him, and looked directly into those eyes that had once captivated me. "You don't regret betraying me, nor do you regret loving the wrong person. You only regret miscalculating your bets, losing the Kui family's support and the throne that was almost within your grasp." My words were like the sharpest blade, slicing through all his tender pretenses to reveal the ugliest desires and schemes beneath. His face instantly turned deathly pale, his lips trembling, unable to utter a single word. "Li Xian, you've never loved anyone. You only love yourself, only cherish that illusion that could elevate you to the pinnacle of power." I cast him one final glance, looking at him as if he were a complete stranger. "Your remorse is worthless. Go back now, don't ruin my auspicious hour." I turned around and no longer looked at him. Behind me were his staggering footsteps, receding in despair and heaviness. The next day, a bridal procession stretched for miles, the phoenix carriage departing the boudoir. I married into the Eastern Palace, becoming the crown princess. Li Yang treated me exceedingly well, with mutual respect and harmonious companionship. He is a gentle and refined gentleman, and also a qualified crown prince. With the support of the Kui family, his governance as regent became increasingly adept, earning him the deep admiration of court officials. 2 years later, as the old emperor's health gradually declined, he naturally ascended to the throne. I became the empress, taking my rightful place in the central palace, and Li Xian, shortly after his ascension to the throne, was accused of colluding with foreign officials with treacherous intent, stripped of all his noble titles, and confined for life at the imperial mausoleum to guard the tombs of his ancestors. That lonely mausoleum became the prison of his remaining years. Days flowed by like water. I gave birth to the legitimate heir, who was then enshrined as the crown prince. When managing the imperial harem, she also kept everything in perfect order. I thought that in this lifetime, I would continue peacefully with Li Yang like this, becoming an emperor and empress praised by the world, until 5 years later, that autumn, while reviewing memorials, Li Yang suddenly coughed up blood and fainted. The imperial physicians came and went, each with grave expressions, utterly helpless. They could only diagnose His Majesty's depleted vitality and severely damaged life force, yet failed to identify the root cause of his illness. I kept vigil by his sickbed, watching his increasingly gaunt face, until the frozen lake within my heart finally cracked open. When he awoke, he grasped my hand. His grip was weak. "Yuenro, don't be afraid," he smiled at me, his smile still gentle, yet unable to conceal his weariness. "My condition, I know it myself. I'm afraid I won't last much longer." My heart sank heavily. He looked at me, his eyes filled with remorse. "Do you still remember that day at the hunting grounds in the Western Hills? The blade I took for you. Turns out it was poisoned." My entire body trembled as if plunged into an icy abyss. It was a slow-acting exotic poison from the western regions, colorless and odorless. Normally, it shows no symptoms, only gradually corroding one's internal organs. All these years, I've been suppressing it with rare and expensive herbs, thinking I could hold it at bay forever, but unexpectedly, it has relapsed. His voice grew fainter, his breathing weaker. I clenched his hand tightly, my nails digging deep into my palm, yet I felt no pain. With his last ounce of strength, he looked at me, and at our 4-year-old son, Yuan Ru. "The road ahead will be hard for you, our child, the great Jew's empire. I leave them all to you. In my past life, what Li Xian feared most before his death was my regency behind the curtain. In this lifetime, my husband, on his deathbed, personally placed the entire empire into my hands." Outside the window, a withered yellow leaf spiraled down and landed softly. In the 5th year of Yuanhe, winter, the new emperor passed away. The entire nation mourned in sorrow. I carried my 4-year-old child and ascended to the highest point of the Hall of Supreme Harmony, with all civil and military officials kneeling in reverence. Clad in solemn black court robes, I held the young new emperor in my arms. He was too young to understand death or power. Merely gazing curiously at the sea of dark-clad figures below, I firmly placed the imperial jade seal into his tiny hands. "Rise, my lords," my voice, calm and clear, echoed through the vast hall. The courtiers rose, chanting "Long live the emperor." I lifted my head and gazed beyond the hall. On the horizon, a crimson sun is breaking free from the clouds, bursting forth with radiant energy. Golden rays pierce through the morning mist, painting the glazed tiles of the Forbidden City in a dazzling golden hue. A new day begins. End.